Most actors spend their entire lives chasing the same thing: the light, the poster. That single moment when an entire room turns all at once to look at them. James Spader had every piece of it within reach. The face, the voice, the cut-glass pedigree. By the middle of the 1980s, Hollywood had already decided exactly what he was going to be: a leading man, a heartthrob, the next clean-cut star, with an upper-class jaw, and a stare the camera could not get enough of. And then, quietly, deliberately, without ever raising his voice about it, he turned and walked the other way. He did not chase the light. He went looking for the shadows. He spent the next 40 years playing the men your therapist warned you about. The manipulators, the predators, the cold, brilliant, deeply uncomfortable creatures that most leading men would never go near. This is the story of an actor who was built for fame and who spent his entire career hiding from it. This is Stardust Story, and here, fame creates stars, and time turns them into dust. Today, the strange and singular career of James Spader. James Todd Spader was born in Boston in 1960. Both of his parents were teachers, and that small detail shapes everything that follows. He grew up in a house where ideas were the real currency, where conversation was treated almost as a sport, where being interesting mattered more than being liked. He was sent to Phillips Academy in Andover, one of the most prestigious preparatory schools in the entire country. It is the kind of institution built to move its students in a straight, clean line toward the Ivy League, and from there toward money, comfort, and quiet influence. That future was handed to Spader on a silver plate. At 17, he dropped out, and he moved to New York to become an actor. This was the first real decision of his life, and it tells you almost everything you need to know about him. He did not ease his way into rebellion. He took the safe, certain, gold-plated future that was waiting for him, and he chose its exact opposite. While his former classmates were filling out college applications, Spader was teaching yoga, driving trucks, and working as a stable boy. These were not glamorous, romantic, starving artist jobs. They were hard, physical, deeply unfashionable, the sort of work that the world he came from would have found almost unthinkable. He was not slumming for the experience. He was searching for something, and he was willing to be uncomfortable while he looked. By the early 1980s, the roles began to arrive, and on paper, Spader had everything the studios were hungry for: the intense, watchful gaze, that effortless air of privilege that a camera simply loves. The Brat pack was forming all around him, that loose group of young, beautiful faces who would come to define a whole decade of American film. And Spader had the right age, the right look, and moved in all the right circles to belong among them. But he never quite became one of them. Instead, almost immediately, he found a darker corner to live in. In Pretty in Pink, he played Steph, the rich, sneering golden boy who casually destroys other people for his own entertainment. In Mannequin, he was the oily, scheming corporate villain. And in Less Than Zero, he played a drug dealer with a chilling, unbothered calm that lingered long after the film was over. Then came Wall Street, for the director Oliver Stone, where Spader brought the quality that would soon become his signature: a face you could not quite read, a man whose true thoughts always seemed to be hiding somewhere just behind his eyes. He had become, very quickly, the actor you loved to hate, the smooth, privileged antagonist in the expensive suit. And it would have been easy, even comfortable, to stay there forever, to build a long and steady career as cinema's favorite well-dressed villain. And then came a single film that changed the shape of everything. In 1989, a young and almost completely unknown director named Steven Soderbergh premiered his very first feature film. It was called Sex, Lies, and Videotape. It would go on to win the top prize at the Cannes Film Festival, the Palme d'Or, and it helped launch the entire American independent film movement that defined the decade to come. And right at the center of it stood James Spader. He played a soft-spoken drifter named Graham, a man who is impotent, emotionally sealed off, and able to feel any kind of intimacy only by filming women as they talk, openly and privately, about their own desires. It is a deeply uncomfortable character, voyeuristic, quietly manipulative. A man who has thought and intellectualized his way out of any real human connection and built an elaborate machine that gives him the illusion of closeness while protecting him from the terror of the real thing. And Spader played him with an eerie, disarming gentleness. No villainous edge, no obvious menace, just a calm, wounded, almost tender presence, which somehow made the whole thing far more unsettling than any monster ever could have been. For that performance, at just 29 years old, James Spader won the award for Best Actor at the Cannes Film Festival. Overnight, he was a serious, critically respected, properly credentialed artist, and here is the moment that defines his entire life. That enormous success did not push him toward conventional stardom. It did something stranger. It gave him permission. Because now the industry finally understood exactly what James Spader was offering. Intelligence, intensity, and a rare willingness to live, fully and without flinching, inside the parts of human nature that the rest of us would much rather pretend we cannot see. So instead of running from it, he leaned all the way in. The early 1990s were the golden age of the erotic thriller, and Spader quietly became its single most fascinating practitioner. In White Palace, he played a repressed, grieving young widower who falls for an older working-class waitress. For the first time, you could see a Spader character as fully, recognizably, painfully human. In Bad Influence, he played a mild, anxious man whose carefully ordered life slowly comes apart after he falls under the spell of a charming stranger. And you can see exactly why he gets pulled under, even as every alarm in your body is screaming at him to run. And in Dream Lover, he flipped the whole thing around, playing a husband slowly consumed by the suspicion that the woman he loves is quietly, deliberately taking him apart. These were not respectable prestige pictures. They were genre films, built to thrill and to seduce an audience. But Spader brought something to them that almost no one else could. He always showed you the machinery underneath the surface, the need, the wound, the performance that people construct piece by piece in order to get what they secretly want. The director David Cronenberg pushed that obsession to its furthest possible extreme in a film called Crash, about a group of people who become aroused by the violence of car accidents. It is genuinely transgressive, disturbing material, and Spader walked into it with a cold, clinical, almost scientific calm that made it more unsettling still. And then, in 2002, came Secretary. He played a lawyer named Edward Gray, a man who enters into a dominant and submissive relationship with his secretary, played by Maggie Gyllenhaal. In the hands of a lesser actor, the role could have been nothing more than a simple predator. Instead, Spader turned it into a strange, tender, and genuinely subversive love story. By this point he was, without any real competition, cinema's leading explorer of power, control, obsession, and desire. There was exactly one moment when the other door swung wide open for him. In 1994, Spader starred in Stargate, by a long distance the biggest box office hit of his career, and the closest he would ever come to a traditional Hollywood hero. He played Dr. Daniel Jackson, a brilliant and slightly awkward linguist who helps to unlock an ancient gateway to another world, standing shoulder to shoulder with Kurt Russell's square-jawed soldier. And Spader made him work beautifully. He played the smartest man in the room with real warmth and curiosity, and never once let him curdle into a cliché. Now, most actors in the world would have taken a hit like that and ridden it straight into a decade of enormous studio blockbusters. Spader nodded politely at movie stardom, and then he turned around and walked right back into The Stranger. Thornier, far more uncomfortable work that he actually wanted to do. He treated the single biggest success of his career as nothing more than a brief detour. And that one choice, more than any single performance, is the master key to understanding the man. In 2003, Spader did something that surprised almost everyone. He turned to television. He joined an established legal drama called The Practice, playing an attorney named Alan Shore. Shore is brilliant, morally slippery, and treats the law itself not as a system of right and wrong, but as a fascinating intellectual game to be won. The character was so magnetic, so alive, that the celebrated writer David E. Kelley built an entire new series around him. That series was Boston Legal. Alan Shore is everything that Spader does better than anyone. He is ethically flexible, choosing his clients based on whether their problems happen to interest him, rather than on any consistent moral code. He weaponizes language, talking himself into and out of almost any situation on Earth. He is always performing. And yet, underneath all of that performance, there is a deep and genuine loneliness. A man quietly desperate for just one person to see past the act and recognize him. He finds that one person in Denny Crane, played by William Shatner. Two damaged, brilliant, aging men who can finally be completely honest only with each other. Their unlikely friendship became the beating heart of the entire show, and it proved something important about Spader. He could become a real, popular, award-winning television star without softening a single one of his strange edges. The role won him multiple Emmy Awards. And then, in 2013, came the role that would quietly define the entire next decade of his life. In The Blacklist, Spader played Raymond Reddington, a former government agent turned master criminal, a man on every watch list in the world, who one day simply walks into the headquarters of the FBI, surrenders himself, and offers to help them hunt down the very criminals he once worked beside. Reddington is the most accessible, most immediately likable character Spader has ever played, carefully designed for a mainstream network television audience. And yet he is still, unmistakably, a Spader creation through and through. Watch closely what he does with the part. Reddington spends entire scenes delivering huge, dense blocks of plot, the kind of heavy exposition that should be absolutely deadly to sit through. But Spader savors every single word, the strange, unexpected rhythms, the pauses that land in all the wrong and perfect places, the way he lingers over a particular phrase as though he is tasting an expensive wine. He somehow makes pure information feel dangerous and seductive and impossible to look away from. The Blacklist ran for 10 full seasons and more than 200 episodes. It became the longest-running and by far the most famous role of his entire career. And if James Spader is a mystery on screen, he is somehow an even greater one off it. He gives very few interviews. And when he does sit down for one, he tends to circle slowly around his answers, rather than ever quite landing on them. He almost never discusses his private life. He talks about the craft of acting the way an engineer talks about a complicated machine. Methodically, precisely, searching, patiently, for the exact mechanism that makes a character work from the outside in. He has been married twice. He has 3 sons. And he chooses to live in New York rather than in Los Angeles, which, for a working Hollywood actor, is its own quiet kind of statement. He has described himself as a man who needs solitude, who finds the endless social demands of the industry genuinely exhausting. There is a strong sense that, for Spader, acting itself is a way of engaging with the whole world without ever having to fully step inside of it, a way to explore every corner of human emotion while keeping a careful, protective distance from it. And this, honestly, is exactly the kind of career this channel was built to follow. The actors who quietly refused the obvious path, the ones who chose the strange and the difficult over the safe and the easy, and turned their careers into something that belonged to no one but themselves. If that is the kind of story that pulls you in, Take 1 second right now and subscribe, because there are a great many more of them coming. Even when he finally stepped into the very center of the blockbuster machine, he stayed completely himself. In Avengers: Age of Ultron, Spader voiced and physically performed the villain Ultron, using motion capture to bring real weight and movement to the character. And rather than play a simple, cold computer program, he gave the robot his own deeply unsettling wit, a darkly funny, genuinely menacing intelligence that made Ultron feel less like a special effect and more like a living, thinking threat. And in Steven Spielberg's film Lincoln, in a small but unforgettable role, he brought that very same slippery, knowing charm to a real historical figure. Wherever you placed him, in a tiny independent film or a gigantic comic book epic, in a courtroom or on another planet, he remained, completely and instantly, James Spader. So step all the way back and look at the entire shape of this career, and something genuinely remarkable comes into focus. For 4 straight decades, James Spader has been circling and exploring a single enormous idea: power. How we acquire it, how we perform it for others, how it corrupts us, and how, strangely, it also connects us. His characters are nearly always wearing some kind of mask, playing a carefully chosen role in order to get the thing they need. And he never once judges them for it. He always finds the wounded human being living underneath, the old injury that drives all of the behavior, the deep need that generates the entire performance. And his real influence is now absolutely everywhere in modern television, even though his name is almost never attached to it. The articulate monster, the charming predator, the brilliant manipulator that we somehow find ourselves rooting for anyway. The entire age of the anti-hero, of the complicated lead who is neither simply good nor simply bad, owes a quiet and enormous debt to the territory that Spader mapped out first, alone, years before it was fashionable. The Walter Whites, the Don Drapers. He taught whole audiences to grow comfortable with being uncomfortable, to find the flickering humanity inside people they would much rather dismiss as nothing more than evil. He was handed every single tool a person could ever need to become a major movie star. The looks, the talent, the pedigree, the wide open door, and he spent 40 years quietly, patiently refusing all of it, in order to build something far rarer and far harder. A body of work that belongs entirely and only to him. A career shaped completely on his own terms. Fame creates stars, and time turns them into dust. But every so often, someone steps out of the light on purpose, and in doing so, becomes utterly impossible to forget. If you have made it all the way to the end of this one, then you already understand what this channel is really about. And there is another video waiting for you on the screen right now, about another star who walked their own strange and difficult road. Go and watch it next. Subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me honestly. Is James Spader the most underrated actor of his entire generation? Or is he exactly as appreciated as he ever wanted to be? I will see you in the next one.